Well, that's nice to know.
Did you hear that too?
Yes, I did.
That was pretty amazing how your Zoom setup there just talked to both of us
I know.
as if we're somebody.
Yeah, well, that just shows Luke doesn't know much.
All right, let's just bring the folks up to date right
Okay.
quick. We're glad everybody's here and on, and we're getting ready to open the show. We're doing what we usually do. Roger is sitting in his accustomed surroundings there that is all neatly put away, all of his libraries of black and white television shows and entertainment formats of one type or another, plus about a kabillion years that he was in the record business and still is in many ways, UB Blake Records. And so Roger has all this knowledge, and there's a reason why I bring that up immediately right here. But I don't know if we should get into it yet because it's heavy, Roger. It's
Ooh.
very heavy.
Ooh. I don't know whether I can handle heavy this morning or not, but I'll give it a shot.
You know, on the radio, we used to say, Hatman Heavy.
Uh-huh.
That's kind of what we're doing on your show.
All right.
Like that. And we have critics out there, Roger. I don't know if I understand one got to you last week, but we have critics on this show.
Oh, absolutely. But you know what's good about a critic?
No, wait a minute. Can I think on that a while?
No. It's obvious what's good about a critic.
Oh,
They're listening to the show.
Oh, you're right about that.
See, the more critics we have, the bigger audience we have.
And if your audience numbers are where ours are on this show, then you don't want to run off anybody.
Absolutely not.
Oh, we got a lot to talk about on this Roger Dykes Just Sayin episode. And you've had quite a week, sir.
It's been a challenge.
Yeah. But we've already talked about that. And you said, well, of course, we could. So many of my conversations with Roger during the week, we'll bring each other up on the phone and talk about some things. And Roger will say, well, of course, we can't talk about this on the podcast because so-and-so. And he usually makes sense when he says that. I go, oh, shoot, he's right. We probably ought not to bring that up.
Uh-uh.
But yeah.
No. My life is lived in dark. My life is lived in darkness, and it's shrouded in darkness and mystery. And how does Roger do what Roger does? And no one knows for sure.
Yeah, well, that sounds like my job.
But they are amazed what all I sometimes get done and can't figure out how in the world I got it all.
Well,
I was able to accomplish it.
I have watched you closely for a number of years, and I actually have some of those answers on how you get things done. But you're right. It's kind of amazing. And you do a lot of things on faith. You just have faith that if you stay pursuing your goal, be like this person or that person, they'll never talk to you, Roger. They'll never return your call. And the next thing you know, you're at the very least talking to their right-hand man or woman,
Right.
and things get done.
Well, I wish we had a little more of that going on in Austin right now. But nonetheless, I'm glad we're as far along as we are.
Roger, all you have to do is outlive this stuff. I've been thinking about this, and I want to give you good advice as we go along here. And all you have to do is live long enough for the people in Austin to return your calls and stuff.
That's true. That would probably work. I've outlived a number of administrations down there, so
and
I guess one more won't matter.
And so now you have a podcast.
Right.
So it's like they're finding out things we already know from a couple of experiences that Oh, well, yeah, we listen, but, we don't have, we'll tell Roger we'll call him next month. And, oh, man. Okay. All right. It is so easy just to get carried away with this stuff that a lot of times we talk about on this show. But you know what we got to do now? We got to open the show, Roger.
Oh, my.
Oh, man. This is the moment. I get tingly, kind of goosebumps when this starts. Don't you?
No, but I don't have the air conditioner you do.
Take it away. Hello, I'm Michael Shawn, and welcome to Roger Dykes Just Sayin. Roger Dykes is a teacher and counselor with a master's degree in family counseling from Texas Tech University. He is the owner of UV Blake Records and has written a book titled Non-Persons Rolling in a Normal World. And there's a few more things. Roger was born with cerebral palsy. Now a quadriplegic, he has been confined most of his life to a wheelchair. And for a while, even enjoying a career as a stand-up or sit-down comedian and after-dinner speaker. Disabled? Yes, but you forget about that pretty quickly because Roger thrives. So here is Roger Dykes.
All right. Well, it's good to be here, Michael, and I'm glad you can be with us, and I'm glad all our podcast listeners can be here with what we're going to cover today. I think it's going to be an interesting show because there's some aspects we've not dealt with before.
Well, I'm anxious to know about a lot of that stuff myself. This will be the first time you and I have had a chance to talk. I know both of us have had a lot of things going on the last few days, and but Roger, before we move on, can we readdress this critics thing one more time? Because I have had some very profound thoughts. You know, I do that, Roger.
I know, it's scary.
Well, oh, yeah, it's scary. Let me tell you something. You would, and I know you've been in the entertainment business and after dinner speaker, and a lot of people who have become familiar with you now don't really realize, although in the earlier podcast programs, we did mention this and we talk about it, and I think it's mentioned in your intro. But I don't think that people really understand that you were out there in the entertainment business. You had a full-time handler and manager that traveled with you, and that you performed in nightclubs and special events, banquets, and all kinds of stuff, and were quite popular for a number of years. And
but I got over it.
People, I think, forget about that is an example of the point that I'm about to make, and that is, you have taught me, Roger, over the last few years that one of the things that you deal with, and you have to deal with it so often in so many, you can't even go to a restaurant that you don't deal with this, but that you have to deal with is that people will, and let's call them, for the sake of this discussion, normal people, will so often put you in a box. This is, well, look at him. He needs to be kept in his box. And he needs to be treated a certain way or not treated at all. In fact, ignored, and ask questions of the person you're with, like, does he want a drink of water? Just stupid stuff that is blatantly treating you disrespectfully. And most of the time, the people that do it are well-meaning. They just don't know any better. They assume so many things. But I want to tell you something. I want to take this a step further. I have noticed something by being around you for years and years. This is not something that's obvious. You make me aware of it, though. You tell me about it, and you've told me about this kind of stuff always, that there are people that know you, but you may not be interacting with them closely like you would with a close friend, so that you gave me an example of this. You said, like, when I go to church, and the church that you go to, you have been there for a long time, and you're an accepted member, and you've done family counseling. Remind folks, you have a degree from Texas Tech in family counseling, and so much more training that you've added on to that. Isn't it correct? You've done work in that department with Lubbock Christian University, and other people usually use you directly or indirectly. And that doesn't even count your authoring your book, your writing, your teaching, all the other stuff that you do.
Right.
Roger, even people that profess to know you, you have told me that many times they'll go, "Hey, Roger," and I think all of us do this, but I think you especially do. They'll go, "Hey, Roger, how you doing? How was your week? What's going on, buddy? How are things going? How you feeling, Roger?" And it is so much easier just to say, "Oh, I'm fine. How are you?" Because, man, your life, and especially these days, is complicated.
Absolutely.
There's no nice way to put that. It is very complicated. People listen to the past umpteen podcasts that we've done because we carefully explain so much of that. But the point is, as a fully disabled quadriplegic that you have been your entire life, now you are dealing with some things from the state of Texas government and different things that are just unfair. They are simply unfair. And we have explained it a number of ways. But the thing that I notice is that people who even profess to know you will, without realizing it, want you to stay in your box. And I just want to say to you, and I don't mind saying it on a podcast because it feathers in with everything else we're talking about. When you're doing something like this that has the potential of playing for hundreds of people at a time, that can be anywhere, Roger, the thing that I would only say to you is that the last thing that you want to do is listen to one person who zero experience in what you're in the middle of doing, and yet wants to quickly throw you back in your box. That I'm beginning to see, Roger, what you've been trying to teach me and tell me over the years, because you see it. I'll see it. I'll stand back and I will listen to and I will watch things that happen to you, and I'll go, holy smoke, there it is. They want Roger to stay in his box. They want you to be predictable, even to what they're going to hear on your next podcast. I would just like to say that we may need to change the name of this podcast. Roger Dykes Out of His Box. What do you think? Does that sound good? Here, let me write that down.
You write that down. Yeah, we'll discuss it later. Well, I have a lot of friends, and I appreciate all the people who listen to the podcast and their comments. I get comments every time we do this. I've got one person who always sends me a critique. I have another one that occasionally sends a critique in, but I get about 4 or 5 critiques every time we do this.
Yeah,
and they're me. The ones that are somewhat possibly considered negative are meant in a constructive way. They're not putting the podcast down or anything like that, or me or you. In fact, we both get high remarks of how good we work together and how long we must work on these in order to get them as smooth as we do. They don't realize how much you edit and take care of the mistakes I make. But
don't start being nice to me now, Roger. You've already told me, dial it back, big boy. You know.
Nonetheless, I'm in favor of any comment, constructive or otherwise, that people make. The key is, though, I am independent enough that I can take the comments and decide whether or not they're meaningful, if they'll fit in with where we are, if it's something that needs to be dealt with, changed, or whatever.
There you go. And like, for instance, last week we talked about you starting a music career.
Yes.
Have you worked on your stage show?
I'm still working on the soft shoe thing.
Oh, Roger.
I've got the time step down, though, but I can't quite get the soft shoe thing down.
I'd go fishing with you, Roger. Do you realize what a small...
And tap is most interesting.
A small group of people you are in when I say I'd go fishing with you?
Well, I wouldn't go fishing with me because I'm no fun at the lake. You have to do all the work, and I just sit there and hold the pole. I've done it. I used to do that when I was a kid. We'd go fishing, and of course, I couldn't throw the line out. If I got a nibble, I couldn't do anything about it. If the fish actually was stupid enough to bite my hook, somebody else had to pull it out of the water. But I was part of the fishing experience. So we went to New Mexico one year, and we were at Lake Bonita. And
yeah, I know where that's at.
Right, and so we were there. Of course, we took the van. We slept in the van and all that sort of thing. But anyway, we were out there fairly early in the morning, and I guess one of the park rangers saw us and came back an hour or so later, and he said, "Have you caught anything?" And no, my dad enjoyed fishing, but that was not his favorite sport, so none of us really knew how to do it correctly. So the park ranger said, "I tell you what," he said, "I get off at 4:00, and he said, I'll come back by, and if you haven't caught anything, I will make sure that you do." Okay, fine. That was very kind of him. So of course he came back at 4:00. No, we hadn't caught anything. So he said, "All right." He picks me up, or Dad did, and sets me in his Jeep. And Mom and Dad and my brother and I got in the Jeep, and we headed wherever he wanted to take us. Well, he took us up some back trails, and we got to gates that were locked that he had keys to unlock. And we went to a couple of those, and we got back in the woods in the forest area. And he said, "Now, why don't you see if you can catch any fish here?" Well, those fish, there were so many of them, and they were so hungry that the hook wouldn't even, in fact, they were actually jumping up out of the water to get the hook. You couldn't catch any big fish because the little ones kept biting the hook before it would get down to the big. But it was one of the neatest experiences in my life. because I finally got to go fishing and actually catch fish. And then he took us after we caught all we want. Of course, he said, "Now you can just catch as many you want." Well, we only had that one night to eat there, so Dad said, "Well, we'll get enough for supper tonight." We did, cooked them out over the campfire, and it was one of those memorable experiences in your life that you appreciate.
Oh yeah,
people taking care of you and actually being concerned about your well-being.
Well, now wait just a second, Roger. I'm certain that in your files there you have the guy's name and phone number. So you want to just kind of slip that to me? Would that be
I wish I could. I'm sure by now he's long since retired. That was a long time ago.
It's who you know, Roger. I'm telling you, man.
It's who feels sorry for you out there sitting in the sun not catching any fish. But this is, Michael, this is what makes my world a happy place. We talk a lot of negative on this show. For good reason. There's a lot of negative things in the world that I'd have to deal with. But there's a lot of positive things. I was going to tell you about a friend of mine here in town that owns a hamburger drive-in restaurant. It's over on Milwaukee and 82nd Street.
I know where you. Oh, let's go ahead and mention it.
You want to go ahead and mention it?
Folks locally there in your town will know right where you're talking about if you tell them.
Well, the place is called Heff's Burgers, HEFF apostrophe S Burgers. Yeah. And my caregiver and I went there one time just because it was new. We hadn't been there. So we went in there, and the man that, I'm not sure whether he owns it or manages it, but a very nice, very personable individual, met us and greeted us and was very interesting to talk with. And so we've gone back, and he is very good at his job. He remembers your name. He remembers what you ordered the last time you were in. How he does that, I don't know, but he does. When you get a hamburger and it's got lettuce, it has lettuce, tomatoes, and a pickle and onion on it, you bite down through the sandwich, and especially if it's fairly thick, and his are because the meat is very, very thick and good. When you bite down through it, sometimes you don't get it completely bitten through, and of course, I will also tell you that I am fed hamburgers. I can't hold a hamburger and eat it myself. So people feed me sandwiches and burgers. So anyway, as they're feeding it to me and they pull the burger back, if the tomato didn't quite get bitten through, it drags out of the bun and you end up eating the whole tomato. And we were talking about this, and he said, "Well, why don't we dice it for you?" And I said,
and you're talking about the tomato, the onion, the lettuce, everything pulls out sometimes when you do that. Yeah,
exactly. So he said, "Why don't we try that?" And I said, "Well, I'd be happy to try it. I never have had that done before." So even around here, my family didn't even do that. They didn't think about it. But anyway, he did. So he fixed it for me and brought it to me, and I started eating it. And Michael, that is absolutely the best hamburger I have ever eaten.
Because all of the taste was there.
Right. And because of the way he did it, the last bite of the burger had just as much tomato, pickle, and onion on it as the first bite did.
So you can explain to people to go into Heff's Burgers there, and when they do, order a Roger Dykes special.
Well, I would recommend, depends on if he's there at that time, he would know what you're talking about. But ask for your burger and ask him to dice the vegetables, because he told me, I suggested he add that to the menu as a menu item, And he said, well, we'll have to see if anybody's in, other than you would be interested in it. And I said, well, I don't know, of course, for sure. But I said, there are many people, older people particularly, who have dentures and other things. And they have trouble biting through, because in today's world, as you well know, Michael, the burgers of today are built thick intentionally. I mean, if you look at even the pictures, it's stacked higher than you can get your mouth around.
Oh my!
And they do that, as advertising and other things. But because the burger is so thick, it's very hard if you have any kind of dentures or teeth issues. It's very hard then to bite through all that material and get a separate bite without dragging.
Once again, Roger, you are a champion for not only disabled people, but chewing challenged people all over the country.
And I would ask anybody that hears this who can do it, please go by there. The burgers are excellent. I mean, I'm not sending you to some terrible tasting burger. The burgers are wonderful. But if you would help us out by asking for that particular thing, it could become a menu item.
Now, wait a minute, Roger. You go any further here, we got to send him a bill, or expect to eat free burgers for the rest of the year.
Well, I'm not expecting any of that.
Hey, that's not a bad idea, Roger.
Well, no,
Why don't you work on that a little bit?
I'm not interested in anything free. All I want is to promote someone who cares that much about people with disabilities and is willing to make all sorts of arrangements to make life better for them.
You're right. That's cool. Now, I'll tell you what I want to do. I'm going to change gears. Going to shift gears here for just a moment. I want to go back. You've had a tough week. And talk about a little bit of the, for lack of a better word, negative stuff that you have been dealing with. But to point out first that the reason why you've been dealing with so much of this, and I know you're going to be guarded about what you say, and I understand the reason for that. But there is so much that you have been dealing with, and it all boils down to the same thing that we have talked about from the very first of your podcasts, and that is you are continuing to be treated like a non-person as far as your government handlers are concerned. They are not willing to stop just long enough to look at your real issues that are becoming more perilous all the time.
Well, one of the problems with this program that I'm on, there is no allowance made for an individual to be sick. In other words, the way it's supposed to work is the same thing, and we've talked about it numerous times, but it works this way in illness. If I were to get sick, which I did get sick, I was not seriously death-like, but it was very involved.
You sounded like it to me.
Well, it was not a good situation. But to get to the problem, the state does not have any funds available for you to be sick. In other words, if you're sick, either your family is supposed to come in and take care of you until you get better, or you're supposed to go to the emergency room and let the hospitalization take care of you. Well, as you well know, especially with COVID the way it's been, that's not really an option to go there. If I were to go to the emergency room, unless they got to me real quick, which is unlikely, my caregiver could easily be off the clock before we got back from the emergency room, and we would have the issue of what to do with that person. They're now working for me, but they're not being paid because there's only a certain number of hours. So my point being that illness is not well considered in this program, such that when you're sick, you're kind of on your own. And when I'm on my own without any caregivers around and no family, it becomes a very big challenge.
You can't lift your head off the pillow at that point.
I was very fortunate and very thankful that I had a couple of friends who were willing to come over here and stay with me to help take care of me at night, particularly when I was unable to get the help because one of my major caregivers was in the hospital with pneumonia. So, and of course, that was not planned, obviously. But when that person couldn't be here, all of a sudden, we don't have any backup.
Well, when the way the state has you set up, Roger, when one of your caregivers, a weekday caregiver, gets sick like that, the state's attitude was, well, that's just not supposed to happen.
And I'm supposed to have backup. But the problem, and I would be willing, I'd love to have backup. I would love to have everybody that works for me with 3 or 4 backup people that we could immediately call and fill in. But because the state chooses to not fund this program at a reasonable level, and it really creates problems of finding anybody that one wants to work here for the money I can afford to pay, and 2, to have backup then when they can go to work at any number of places, not necessarily healthcare places, but in any number of places that they can make more money than I can pay.
So let me ask you a question, Roger.
Yes.
What do you need, or what do you feel is the right thing that needs to be said or done? And let's just say that maybe, just maybe, some of the right people might be listening to this podcast because it goes up, it stays up, and remains in your library from now on. So let's say someone that counts tripped over it. What would you say to them?
Well, the first thing I would say is, although I'm a person who doesn't believe in government throwing money at things in order to fix problems, this particular situation needs to be addressed financially. There needs to be more money put into this program across the board, not just for me, but across the board, to bring the pay scale up to something comparable to what people can get in non-governmental situations.
And this is for your caregivers.
This is for the caregivers. And I never get it. I want to make it very, very clear that no matter what happens to the money, I never get any of it, or it goes somewhere. It goes for my health, and it goes for my care, which is the way it should be. But I'm not trying to get more money somehow that I'm going to profit. I will not profit. I want the money so I can afford to get people, and they'll be happier coming over and working for me if they're getting a decent wage as opposed to what they're getting now. That would be number one. Number two, we need to look at, and we've talked about this before, but we need to, and I hope I'm using the right terms. These were offered to me by people in government, so I assume they're correct. They need to develop a carve-out program. Now, let me explain very quickly what a carve-out is. That's where you take a certain segment of the population and make special rules because of their special circumstances. In other words, if you have no family, which I do not, if you have no family that's living anywhere close to you, that means that everything you have done has got to be paid for in order to get a caregiver here to do it. Now, there needs to be additional money put into the fund for people like me. I don't think there would be that many that would not have family, because most people do, but I'm a bit rare in that sense, partly because of my age. I'm older than most of the people in this program. But there needs to be a carve out that if you meet certain criteria, in my case, no family, that more additional money would be given to you to help supplement situations like I just went through last week when I was needing someone here, but did not have funds to do it. There are those who would say, well, if you're in that bad a shape, you need to be put in a nursing home situation where they will take care of you. I would agree, except the problem being that when hopefully I recover from the illness as I have, when you recover, but they put you in a nursing home, you can't go back home. I mean, once you leave home and go there, it's permanent. So you don't want to go there for a bad cold because you're going to get over it and you're going to say, well, I don't want to be in this situation the rest of my life. So as a result, you have to weather the storm and make the best of it, of trying to survive at home without help, without as much help as you need,
Roger,
for the period of time that you're sick.
There's a couple of things that I think it's imperative that you allow me to point out right here. One is it is much more expensive to keep you in a nursing home than it is on the program you are on now, living in your home. So you're not asking for budget increases. You're asking for a different way of doing things primarily. And the other thing is this. I've noticed, Roger, that a lot of times you say, I want them to give me more money for that I can direct my caregivers and that sort of thing with. The truth is, now correct me if I'm wrong. The truth is, what I have seen, your caregivers are paid directly from the state of Texas within that budget that you are given to manage and control. And it's not realistic now. So when you say, and you've said it a couple of times here in the last few minutes, when you say, I want them to give me more money, that's not really what you're talking about. You want a budget increase for you to be able to work with to provide for the things that you just got through talking about. Yeah. This money does not come through Roger's hands.
No, I never said, I cannot touch any of the state money. It is designed that way, and I understand it. But in other words, I do not profit in any way, and that's the reason I try to make sure. Now, you can spend the money. You can have the money spent on office supplies. You can do a lot of different things with it, but of course, still never comes to me. But because I know that my world depends on caregivers, I intentionally sacrifice things I could have bought for my comfort in order to have more money available for the caregivers. I want them to get every dime that's possible, and even at that, it's not enough.
Roger, we're running out of time here. In the few minutes that we have left, if there was a way that a person listening to this podcast, so we're not asking anybody for any money. In fact, we can't, and that's another whole show. The way they have you set up, you certainly can't receive any money.
No.
But Roger, if there was a person that might be willing to write a letter or an email to someone, and I know this is sticky because I know partially what your answer is going to be. What should they say, or whom should they write to maybe voice their concern for the things that you're talking about?
Well, I would recommend if they wanted to do something to write there in Texas, don't waste time in Washington. This is a state program, not a federal. So we need to stay within the state. But write your congressman, write your senator, and say, I've heard about this project, and please put on there, if you will, The it's initials, but it's CDS, class, CLASS. That's the name of the program. Tell them that you've heard about this program and that you would like to have someone to speak with me, email me, contact me, and let me discuss with them what I believe we can do, what they can do to help me, and what I can do to make the program work better.
I'll tell you, folks, I talked to Roger 2 or 3 times over the last few weeks, and I was genuinely concerned about you, little brother, and you sound so much better than you did, man.
Absolutely.
Even going to the doctor is not simple for Roger, so he made it through, though.
And I'm very thankful.
All right, Roger, so until next time, can you hold down the fort a little while longer?
I'll do my best.
All right. Adios, little brother.
All righty. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Roger Dykes Just Sayin. If you'd like to get a message to Roger, his Facebook account is listed as Roger Dykes. Become a friend, or you can send your questions and comments to rogerdykes51@gmail.com. That's ROGERDYKES51@gmail.com. Our podcast reveals a new episode every 3 weeks. Rollout is on Wednesday evening, shortly after dark, Texas time. Join us next time for our next episode of Roger Dykes Just Sayin. I'm Michael Shawn. On behalf of Roger Dykes, thanks for listening.